Hey, good afternoon to you. 5:07 now. News Talk 105.9 WMAL, where we're making sense of the news. Coming up this hour, Ashley Oliver will join us at 5:30. She's from the Washington Examiner. We'll talk to her about the latest out of New York and the effort to go after Donald Trump that the left is undertaking inside of America's courts. You can join us at 888-630-9625, 888-630-WMAL. Speaker Mike Johnson trying to navigate through his conference these days. Here he was this morning.
Process to break the bills into 4 separate measures for consideration, and that is what we will have tomorrow. Everyone can vote their will and their constituents' desires on the Israel aid, the Ukrainian aid, the Indo-Pacific, and then our 4th national security package that has all of our innovations in it. Because we did this process, we got a better outcome here. We have a lot of innovations that the Senate did not consider. We include the Repo Act, which, as you know, is the use of corrupt Russian oligarchs' assets to help fund the resistance in Ukraine. We introduced the loan concept for the governmental assistance part. It'll be provided in a loan instead of a gift. We also included some really important sanctions on Russia and China and Iran, which I believe is the new axis of evil, and many of us do, and they are the ones who are the aggressors in this situation.
That's Mike Johnson explaining why they need to get all of this foreign aid out of the United States House and then ultimately out of the country. And as he's explaining all that, I mean, one thing that definitely stands out to me in that audio is how he talked about what we're giving to Ukraine would be in the form of a loan now, rather than just a grant to Ukraine of more money or lethal aid. And you know, in Ukraine, we've been paying for everything. We've been paying the pensions. We've been literally subsidizing businesses in Ukraine to keep them open in their country. And he says it's a loan now, but what he didn't disclose is that the text of the legislation says that Joe Biden can begin waiving the loan obligations starting in November, which is literally the election. So right after the election, Biden can just snap his fingers and Ukraine doesn't have to pay the money back. Why be dishonest about that? Why not just be forthright about that? Also, in the Ukraine money that they're going to be sending out the door, they're going to send some $300 million to Ukraine's border service. Ukraine's border service. Not included in the big foreign aid package is national security money for us, for our border. And that's what has so many conservatives up in arms today. Mike Johnson rode into office on an expectation. Well, he was chosen. He was considered the candidate who can make it through. But when he got here as Speaker of the House, he did it with a promise that he would prioritize the border and not prioritize foreign aid until America's border was resolved. He's abandoned that now. Now, he claims it's just about the margins. He's only got a 1-vote majority. It's the best he can do. It's the best he can do. He was on with our friend Mark Levin last night, chatting with him. Mark did a great interview with him, and they got a chance to speak at length. And Mark let Mike just explain things, the speaker. And here's what he said about those foreign aid bills. They're going to be voted on separately, he says, but in the end, they'll all be banded together.
We took that bill that had lumped Israel aid, Ukraine, and the Indo-Pacific together, and we broke it into separate pieces so that in the House, everyone can vote up or down on their merits, each one of those items. And then we added a 4th bill to it, which is kind of a supplemental. We call it the Secure America Act. And it has some of our policies and some of our preferences in there, where we make it tougher on Iran and Russia and China with sanctions. And we had the Repo Act, which is the seizure and transfer of about $5 billion in Russian sovereign assets in the U.S. to help the Ukraine effort. Some of the other innovations and things that we all believe in. The loan concept, that's something that President Trump has championed. We added that into this so that the Ukrainian funding that goes to support anything related to the government is actually a loan instead of a gift. I mean, there's a lot of important policy innovations and things that we've changed in here, and we added an amendment process so that the members of the House can vote their will and add things and subtract things.
But yet again, no mention by Speaker Johnson that Joe Biden can just make the loan status instantly change. He can forgive that loan by virtue of law, unlike what he's doing right now with all of these student loans and his rich kid voters across the country. For more on all of this, I want to bring in Chris Bedford now. He's a senior politics editor and D.C. correspondent for The Blaze. Chris, good to have you with us, sir.
Hey, great to be here.
Mike Johnson comes into office. He made a number of promises about what he would do for the country. He said he would prioritize the border and that any other foreign aid would be conditioned on securing that border. He also indicated that he would no longer allow warrantless surveillance of Americans, but last week he was the tie-breaking vote to preserve that power for the United States government. What has happened here?
There's a lot of different ideas that you see bandied around, like, oh, he's been compromised, or there's some kind of, they've got something on him, they're threatening him.
Right.
But, I really think that the simplest answer here is just human weakness. Some people, it's difficult to stand up against a lot of intelligent and powerful people that want to move you. We've talked a lot recently about the SCIFs, which is where the intelligence agencies hand you confidential information. They can really frighten you. But in D.C., they've been really misused a lot. The SCIFs, where these congressmen go in there, they meet with their handlers who give them a bunch of really scary information about how 9/11 will happen if they don't change this warrantless wiretapping law, or if they change it, how Europe and Paris will be conquered if they don't send money immediately to the losing war in Ukraine. And this is information that you can't repeat to anyone under penalty of law. And it's information that, of course, you can't confirm. You just have to completely trust. And it's information that always seems to go one way. I've never heard of a SCIF briefing about deaths or dangers at the border. It's usually about things we need to do abroad, or things that they need to do, intel agencies need to do domestically. And he's been citing these over and over again as the reasons why he's had to flip, why for some reason now having criminal gangs in charge of the southern border is no longer his priority, and why he's essentially forming, without the voters' consent, a new governing coalition in D.C. that has pushed away the conservatives, the GOP. It's pushed away the leftists, the Democratic Party, and it's just kind of brought together very nakedly for the first time so openly. All the appropriators, all the defense hawks in both parties who just want to push the border aside, push all these voter issues aside, and just focus on sending $95 billion, which, by the way, is like almost $300 million per U.S. citizen, sending that abroad.
Yeah, and one of the things I've noticed, especially talking to politicians quite as frequently as we do, you begin to notice that they establish grooves in their brain through which talking points constantly flow. It's like, and you can detect when they've been using the same talking point before, or when they introduce something new. And when it comes to Speaker Johnson, he had never before used sort of the scare tactic when it came to, we have to keep giving money to Ukraine, that Vladimir Putin is going to invade Poland. That's kind of what the war machine here in Washington's been saying quite a bit. But without any evidence to support it at all, for that matter. No evidence to support it. In fact, all the evidence is countervailing because, Putin can't take Kiev. He's going to invade a NATO country? Come on. And yet all of a sudden you have Mike Johnson saying that out loud as if it's a serious talking point in order to force another $60 billion out of American taxpayers' pockets.
And, it's kind of wild how much this has caused dysfunction in the American government. You've got 3 American political leaders now who are probably at the end of this going to be kneecapped or destroyed by this fight in Ukraine. And you have to wonder what makes it so serious. Mitch McConnell staked his legacy and basically went out fighting for Ukraine. Of course, Kevin McCarthy went out fighting for this war in Ukraine. And you got to wonder, is it something that's going on in Ukraine that's so important? I don't really believe that. Even if you read the New York Times or the Atlantic now, which for a long period of time just mouthpieces of Ukrainian propaganda, even if you read those, you start to get the idea that there's something going very wrong in Kiev, that this war is not going the right way. You have Ukrainian sources coming out saying, it doesn't matter how much equipment you give us, this war is not going to be turned around.
That's Ukrainian military. To your point, just want to make sure I emphasize that. That's Ukrainian military sources saying it doesn't matter how much more support the West gives us. This is not a winning cause.
Not if you're fighting only with Ukrainians. You'd have to be fighting with Americans. And this is something that certainly risks a broader war. But I think it might be because this is actually finally organized resistance in Washington, D.C. to the Pentagon and to the war hawks and to the unending wars abroad that, in the past 23 years, except for the invasion of Afghanistan, have not really had an objective. And we lost the objective in Afghanistan very quickly when it shifted to promoting women's rights and democracy. The war hawks have continued to push constant spending, constant war, ill-defined objectives, returning with no victories. And this is the first time that anyone's really started to stand up to it. And you see resistance growing. I mean, you saw 55 Republicans vote against today on the floor of the House against the rule. That's unheard of. The rule is basically just procedural. It helps the speaker and the party define the terms of debate. It helps the Republican Party or whoever's in charge at the time define how they're going to move forward, what their policies are. You're starting to see this rebellion. So I think it happens to be Ukraine. These explosions happened. It's taken down McConnell, McCarthy, and might take down Johnson. But really, it's just pushing back finally against this constant chorus of we need to go, we need to fight, we need to send weapons, we need to send troops, otherwise Americans will die.
There's a lot of nervousness around this fight, especially the idea that Speaker Johnson could be booted by even just a small number of members. Do you think this is a fight worth having?
Well, I don't think that it's going to end up happening. I don't even think that Marjorie Taylor Greene or the rest are going to push forward with this. There's some hesitancy, and it's been made clear. I'm writing a piece on this right now for the Blitz for next week. That Johnson has got a new parliamentary kind of majority. He's no longer just the leader of the GOP. The Democrats have said that they will come forward and they will back him on this. Of course, not all Democrats. I don't expect Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez to vote for him, just like I don't expect Chip Roy to vote for him. But the Democrats have said they'll defend his speakership. I can't imagine that being a worthwhile fight for the American people, and I can't imagine him staying a speaker for Republicans after this next election. But I do see him surviving in the near future.
So if Republicans can grow somehow their majority in the Congress this year, it's only going to be on the strength of a Donald Trump victory. It's not going to be because they put wins on the scoreboard.
Yeah, well, they're certainly not putting any wins on the scoreboard. And I guess, like you said, replacing the speaker, you have to wonder what comes next. That was kind of a problem when Kevin McCarthy was replaced. Yes. It's like, all right, well, what's your game plan? You're not supposed to really open fire on someone until you have like a mission. That's not something the Pentagon listens to, but it's something the politicians should listen to.
Well, I told Congressman Andrew Clyde earlier, I saw Matt Gaetz in the last 24 hours indicate that, hey, all it would take is bribing a couple of Republican congressmen, and you could literally just get them to vote for Hakeem Jeffries. So we should be careful about this.
Yeah, I think that's right. But you got Republicans on the right who are looking at this and saying, well, who would take over if Johnson went down? And it's going to be Steve Scalise. They don't really want that because Steve Scalise is better at this than Johnson is. Steve Scalise will be more dangerous to them than Johnson is. And that's not a result, I think, that you want to see Matt Gaetz or Marjorie Taylor Greene are going to go for. A more worthy adversary.
Finally, if I can offer kind of a weird way to get to a compliment for Speaker Johnson, I do think he's a decent human being. I do think that. I don't think Carter. And sure, and I haven't seen any evidence to go against that. But what I think is happening goes to the point that you made earlier here, which is that they get him inside of the skiff. They get him in a classified environment. They scare the hell out of him. They say a decent person is going to protect the country. You want to protect the country, Speaker Johnson? And he folds like origami. And that's just not the guy you really want in the end. I mean, maybe for now, just given the circumstances, but in the end, at the top, leading the charge.
Yeah, a decent man doesn't necessarily mean a bad man, but it certainly doesn't necessarily mean a brave man. And I guess all of us sitting there on the sidelines have to sort of consider these things. It's easy to sit there and say, I don't think there should be any more funding for Ukraine, but to actually be the man in the arena and to go forward and to stand against all those many powerful voices who explain why and give you the confidential briefings and show you, oh my gosh, everything that seems common sense is actually not common sense. Well, it becomes more difficult. And that's why it takes a really special person to actually have the strength to lead, especially from the minority. It's so much easier just to go along.
All right, Chris Bedford, as always, great to talk to you, brother, and thanks for coming on the show. As always, taking your calls, 888-630-9625. Anton calling in Maryland, line 4. Anton, you're on the Vince Coglianese Show.
Vince, I'm telling you, Vince, damn the torpedoes, full speed ahead. Stop fooling with these rhino Republicans. They kill us every time. Every time we go, he look like he's going ahead. These clowns kick you in the shin, and you're looking and you 5 steps behind these dumb Democrats. The world, I mean, come on, man.
So Mike Johnson's driving you crazy, Anton.
He drove me nuts 3 times. 3 strikes you out, but you can't kick him out because you got Hakeem Jeffries Islamists sitting up there waiting, chomping at the bit to help finish killing the country. But the rest of these dumb Democrats and Ronald Republicans, come on, man, have us fine. Damn the torpedo, full speed ahead.
Full speed ahead. Anton says you got to fight for us.
Put me in a skiff. I'm gonna protect the American people. What the hell am I gonna go in a skiff for to protect the American people for?
We're not. Me and you aren't allowed in the skiff, Anton. There's just Mike Johnson. He goes in, he pops out, he does what they tell him. Mike, Anton, thank you. I like your laugh. I appreciate the call. Anton just wants them to fight for us. It's a very simple request. Full speed ahead. All right. Hey, coming up, Ashley Oliver is going to be with us. She's a reporter for the Washington Examiner with a closer look at all that tyranny. You know that the star witness in this trial that they're trying to throw at Trump right now in New York is a guy called Michael Cohen. What is he known for? Well, that's right. Lying all the time. This is all going so great. Ashley Oliver joins us just moments from now. Hey, good afternoon to you. 534 here. News Talk 105.9 WMAL, where we are making sense of the news. You can join us, 888-630-9625, 888-630-WMAL. The left's efforts to take down Trump. Well, this week, they're trying to do it in New York. A full jury of 12 jurors and 6 alternates has now been seated in what the Washington Post refers to as the historic hush money trial of former President Donald Trump. After 4 days of jury selection, Justice Juan Merchan saying today, we have a full panel, which means seems like the trial's getting started Monday. But the Democrats trying to keep Donald Trump off the campaign trail. Their star witness is a guy called Michael Cohen, who's been busted for lying a bunch of times. Here he is. He has a podcast, because everybody's got a podcast now. And here's how he talks about Trump. Having once served as his attorney, he now serves as his antagonist.
Week 1 of Trump's New York election fraud trial, and it's as you might expect, a real pain in the ass for Donald Trump. The few days he's had to spend in court, they're long and they're boring, but mostly he's mad as hell that he has to be there at all. He's drifted off to sleep several times, like old guys do, but it's spawned some great new nicknames, like Ebenezer Snooze, Dozo the Clown, and my favorite, coined by Ben Meiselas, my friend, Don Snorleone. By Tuesday, 7 jurors have been seated, and suddenly, Trump started whining that the trial was going too fast. On Tuesday, Trump got caught muttering and gesticulating in the direction of a juror. Not gonna happen. So Judge Merchan immediately shut him down, and then threatened to bar him from the rest of the jury selection process if he did it again. Trump violated the judge's most recent gag order repeatedly.
You know, the best part of all this is, like, to the extent that there's any cohesive legal theory, is that Trump is now in a courtroom because he followed Michael Cohen's legal advice. It's crazy. Ashley Oliver joins us now. She's a Department of Justice reporter for the Washington Examiner. Ashley, good to have you with us.
Hi, thank you for having me on.
What is Michael Cohen up to? You say he's on a media blitz these days.
Yeah, he's been incredibly outspoken in the lead up to this trial starting, and that was a great clip that you just pulled there. He kind of sounds like a caricature almost, and he sounds really fired up about the trial. So yeah, I think he, with this media blitz that he is doing that we covered in the Examiner, he basically is almost preempting the fact that Trump's defense attorneys are probably going to try to sort of chip away at Michael Cohen's credibility, because as we know, he does have an objectively a credibility issue here. He's been caught lying numerous times under oath. He was convicted, or he pleaded guilty to lying to a bank. He doesn't have the greatest history, and that's all in the recent past too. It's not like it happened 30 years ago.
Sure.
He pleaded guilty in 2018 to these crimes, and that's when this started. But also Trump's attorneys are also they're also planning to show that Cohen has an incentive to go after Trump. He's getting a lot of media attention here, and he also has a lot of books out that he's written that are critical of Trump. So, could this help his book sales to make these salacious claims about Trump? I think that's something that the defense attorneys are going to be highlighting, that's a possibility, just to kind of show that Cohen is not necessarily doing all of this in good faith, in their opinion.
Yeah, and at the center of this case, to the extent that it has a cohesive theory, Alvin Bragg's prosecution, he's looking at he took this idea that Trump paid Cohen a legal retainer. He's paying him for legal services. He writes down in his books, "I'm paying this guy for legal services." Cohen turns around and apparently hands Stormy Daniels some money in the form of a non-disclosure agreement. And because Trump didn't write down Stormy Daniels' non-disclosure agreement, you've got Alvin Bragg comes up with a way to try and charge Trump with a felony, and Michael Cohen is the guy who gave Trump the legal advice. So, I mean, am I understanding all of this correctly?
Yeah, it feels like a stretch when you say it like that, doesn't it? And so it's interesting that Bragg is bringing this case. He's really struggling to convince anyone that is remotely supportive of Trump that this is a good faith trial and that these charges are done in good faith. And people are raising a lot of questions about why he's doing it so far after the fact. This all happened in 2016, around the 2016 election, and Bragg is bringing charges. He just brought them last year, about a year ago now. And so why is he doing that when Trump is now running for president is what a lot of the president's, the former president's supporters are saying and questioning. And he's charging him with 34 low-level felonies, which is pretty, these carry a maximum of 4 years in prison total. And it seems very aggressive based on, as you've spelled it out, this sort of working through Michael Cohen. Federal prosecutors went after Michael Cohen in part for this hush money scheme that went on, and they declined to prosecute Trump at the time. So, Cohen was the one that was arranging these payments.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
And it's not even actually clear that what Cohen stood accused of is legitimately a crime. Because the prosecutors accused Cohen of a campaign finance violation for how he handled a non-disclosure agreement with Stormy Daniels. He pled guilty. That never went to trial. It was never even considered in a courtroom. He just pled guilty to it. And that seems to be one of the things that Alvin Bragg is relying on as he tries to now bring charges against Trump.
Yeah, and I've talked to an array of legal experts on this, and I've talked to some people that are rather left-leaning that are New York-based attorneys, and some of them have said this is a very standard run-of-the-mill case for Bragg to bring. They say that with a straight face. They say this is a routine type of white-collar crime that Bragg is charging Trump with, and he's probably going to get a conviction out of it. This is something that's normal for his office and what he's known for doing, whereas a lot of the other countries looking at it kind of cockeyed, like, where did this come from? There's nothing normal about this case. You're going after the leading, Republican presidential nominee. You're going after him so many years after the fact. Cohen is the one at the center of this, and he has all of these credibility problems that a reasonable jury is probably going to have to look at and say, there are doubts here.
So if I'm projecting what's going to happen, then I'll see if this squares with your anticipation too. Kind of looks like Alvin Bragg has a historically weak case with weak witnesses and basically an unimpressive array of facts that he's going to try and bring. And yet, given the jury pool in New York and Judge Merchan's clear animosity towards Trump, it seems pretty obvious that they're going to score a conviction, and that Trump's team is hoping to resolve all of this on appeal. Is that right?
That could be right, but I will say that I've seen the case that the jury pool is not, Trump's attorneys did a good job over the course of this week, whittling down the jury pool that they were working with, and they were able to cull some people that were openly, hostile towards Trump, but they also were able to keep a few people on the jury pool that were, or on the jury bench that were lawyers. So there's actually, I believe there's 2 people that work in the legal world that are now jurors, and they tend to be more scrutinizing of claims, and a lot of other jurors tend to be drawn towards the legal minds on the jury bench. So I've seen the case that could work to Trump's favor. So it's not immediately clear if this bench of jurors is going to be biased against Trump. There's really no indication yet that the majority of them are hostile towards Trump in any way. And surprisingly, there were quite a few people that came in saying, like, I don't really have an opinion on this. I don't pay attention to headlines. I can be fair. I mean, you don't know what they think internally. This is what they're saying in the courtroom, and maybe they want to sit on the bench of the Trump case. But I wouldn't immediately rule out that the jury could potentially rule in Trump's favor, depending on how things go. But there could always be curveballs in the trial, and depends on, Trump's behavior in the courtroom and how the witnesses present themselves, and if there are any surprises that occur that we're not aware of. I know that Cohen has teased that there's going to be surprises, but he says a lot of things, right? So I'm not sure what we're going to expect. But yes, if there is a conviction, they are absolutely going to appeal different aspects of this case.
Right. And the phrase I kept hearing this week when it came to jury selection was being on guard for the Trojan jurors. That's the phenomenon you're talking about, which is jurors withholding their actual opinions because they really do want to get into this trial, but they do have strong opinions about Trump, either for or against.
Yes, and the attorneys were hyper aware of all of the social media activity of all these jurors. They had clearly scoured all of their Facebooks and Twitters and all of that to see if they follow Trump or tweet about Trump or tweet about Michael Cohen or post about any of the witnesses, and to see if to just kind of weed out any opinions that were sort of overt on their social media. But I will also say that jurors they're sworn in under oath when they give answer these questions and go through the questionnaires and all of that. So they really have to be careful about lying. There are the Trojan jurors, sure, and they can, if their opinions are not public anywhere and there's no chance of them coming out, then they could, technically lie under oath. But a lot of them were probably scared into telling the truth in terms of things that could come back to haunt them down the line if they were caught, saying something inaccurate during jury selection.
So let's talk about Trump's gag order now. The judge has imposed a gag order on him. And he's used phrases, kind of over-the-top phrasing, I think, including this week. He was apparently upset that Trump was grumbling about one of the jurors' answers and suggested that he wouldn't allow anyone to intimidate jurors in his courtroom, which seems preposterous to me. I don't think Trump would be, not being in there, but I presume Trump wasn't intimidating a juror. I think he was just grumpy about the answers he was hearing. But tell me about this gag order. How far-reaching is it?
Yeah, this gag order was based a lot on Trump's behavior in his other criminal cases. So it was sort of like coming on flimsy ground, but they did base the gag order off of what the D.C. appellate court had upheld was as appropriate. And so they said there's precedent now based on what the D.C. appellate court decided. And so the prosecutors and ultimately the judge modeled this gag order off of the one in D.C., which kind of made it, gave it a little bit of validation, because if a federal appellate court is saying something is legitimate, then the state courts in New York are probably going to listen to them. And so that's what they modeled it off of. And it is far-reaching. It prevents Trump from referencing any witnesses, any staff. The only person he can really talk about is Judge Merchan and Manhattan District Attorney Alvin Bragg. So outside of that, he can't talk about any of the prosecutors, any of the court staff, anything like that. And it becomes sticky because this is a major First Amendment concern for a lot of people, because he is the leading presidential nominee. And you've got Michael Cohen yapping away just constantly on national media programs about his criticisms of Trump, and Trump cannot say anything about him. And while that might be somewhat normal in a low-profile world where a criminal defendant is on trial and he is not allowed to go talking about witnesses, Trump has this massive platform for a reason. People are interested in him politically and interested in what he has to say and how he's going to defend himself. And he is in some way being restricted from defending himself to the public, while there is at least one witness out there, two actually, Stormy Daniels as well, talking about him in a negative light, and he cannot respond in the same public manner. Now, he can respond through, the way he presents in court and the way that they cross-examine Michael Cohen and Stormy Daniels, et cetera. But is that going to be reported out in the same manner as the way that these witnesses are presenting on their own in the media outside of the courtroom? I mean, it just seems like they're not on equal playing field.
Yes.
And Judge Merchan has said that is okay, because you can't disrupt criminal proceedings, and there needs to be a fair trial, and this is what we need to do to keep the trial fair. And, you can't intimidate witnesses. But Is it balancing what's going on outside the courtroom appropriately? That is a question that a lot of people have, especially those that are defensive of Trump.
Yeah, for sure. And meanwhile, the judge himself is a Biden donor. His daughter is a political activist for Democrats. It's like it stinks to high heaven for anybody who just assesses the objective facts here. And then on the actual trial itself, we were expecting 2 weeks of jury selection, as you just heard Michael Cohen say in his own ineloquent way. That went faster than expected. What's the rest of the trial going to be like? Are we expecting 4 weeks of trial now?
Yeah, they have predicted that it could last until roughly the end of May. So I think it could be about 4 weeks, but keep in mind that they don't go to trial on Wednesdays. That's Merchan's scheduling idiosyncrasy there. He doesn't do trials on Wednesdays. And then there's also Passover that they're taking breaks for. And so there are going to be breaks intermittently, but it seems like the parties are aligned and expecting it to take about another 4-ish weeks. So I think that's what we can expect.
Yes.
Again, there could always be curveballs and whatever else, but they've always been planning for about the end of May for this to end. So I think we can expect to see Trump in the courtroom until about that time. And
President Trump will be required to be there and will not be able to be on the campaign trail on those days.
Yep, he is required every day. He has asked for a couple exceptions. He wanted to appear in the D.C. courtroom to hear the oral arguments before the Supreme Court about his immunity case in D.C. for his separate criminal trial. It's going to be a really high-stakes oral argument day next week for the Supreme Court. He wants to be there. He asked to be there. The judge has not officially denied him that yet. And he's also asked to be present at his son Barron's graduation. And the judge did not outright deny that either, even though I believe the judge as well as the prosecutors objected to him, kind of informally objected to him going, but they've made no official position on that yet. So if he's allowed to do that, those might be two exceptions, but he'll absolutely be taken off the campaign trail outside of that.
Well, if he was a fair judge, he'd let him campaign, but that's not what's happening. Okay, thank you very much. Ashley Oliver there at the Washington Examiner. Thank you for all your excellent reporting. Really appreciate your time today. Chris Bedford, he's right about that. That's true. The Daily Mail with a great headline on that subject. That, it turns out professors in Papua New Guinea think that Joe Biden's a big old racist for assuming that cannibal tribesmen would just eat a Biden who crash landed. That wouldn't happen, they say. No, they have higher standards. They wouldn't eat just any random airdropped Biden. They'd have to be free range and organic and non-GMO and corn-fed and antibiotic-free and soy-free. They have all sorts of standards, you see, for the people that they consume. And they don't like air delivery. They prefer ground delivery. It's a real headline from the Daily Mail today. They wouldn't just eat any white men that fell from the sky. Outraged Papua New Guinea academics lash out at Biden's unacceptable suggestion that cannibals ate his World War II pilot uncle. The political science lecturer Michael Cohen at the University of Papua New Guinea told The Guardian that cannibalism was previously practiced by some communities in very specific contexts, and that locals, quote, wouldn't just eat any white man that fell from the sky. So the more you know. I bet you didn't start this week thinking you were going to learn that Biden family members were historically unlikely to be eaten by cannibals. But here we are. I hope Joe Biden is out on the campaign trail a lot, talks to a lot of people, tells more stories, and then gets fact-checked by the angry natives of the countries he insults. It's going to be a great presidential campaign. I hope you have a really great weekend. The great one, Mark Levin, is up next here on the legendary WMAL.